What is it, Master Luke? I'm not sure. You saved my life. Thank you.
You are alone?
I have 2 droids. We've come in search of a ship that crashed near here.
Maybe I can help you. I am Boba Fett. The ship you seek is nearby.
Here with Clive Smith and Michael Hirsh, who are co-founders of Nelvana Animation, which I was telling Clive I grew up with, my kids grew up with. It's very rare I get to speak to people that I've been watching their work pretty much my whole life. So this is pretty cool. You're going to be speaking at Star Wars Celebration next week in Tokyo. And Michael, you just released a book a few months ago called Animation Nation, How We Built a Cartoon Empire. So that's the history of Nelvana, which I now have to order because I apologize, I didn't realize it. But is this your first Star Wars Celebration?
It is for both of us.
Yes, it is for me, for sure.
And, over the years...
We celebrate Star Wars quietly by ourselves.
We all do in our own special ways. But how, over the years, how have your interactions with fans been?
It's been, one of the sort of joys of doing what we do is bumping into fans because we did so many animated series and animated movies that, you're constantly running into people who grew up with the shows, just as you said, Derek, and then they had their kids who grew up with the shows. So it's really been one of the, when you begin, you don't think about the future that way, right? That you're going to run into the people who grew up with these shows, right? You're just making the show, making it as good as you can be. But, the fact that people remember the shows and remember the characters, that's great.
Yeah. And, it essentially changed everything for you. So, I want to say, because I didn't up top, that why you're going to Star Wars is you both, you created Droids. I remember that from Saturday mornings, Ewoks. But most importantly, I think one of the most influential pieces of Star Wars history was the story of the faithful Wookiee, an animated piece that introduced Boba Fett to the world. And, so how did you get involved with George Lucas?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm going to turn it over to Clive.
Sure.
But basically, we had produced a cartoon. It was our first fully animated cartoon called A Cosmic Christmas. And it had been syndicated widely throughout the United States and around the world. And George Lucas was looking for an animation company to produce the 10-minute cartoon that was part of the 2-hour holiday special that was being made in order to keep, fans alive while, he was finishing The Empire Strikes Back. And when he saw Cosmic Christmas, he identified that he wanted our company, Nelvana, to make the 10-minute short. And so we got a phone call from out of the blue from Lucasfilm saying, would you like to come out and meet George and talk about this project? And the project was The Faithful Wookiee. And when we met with George, we got on the same wavelength very quickly. We identified the design style that we all liked, which was from a French artist named Mobius. Mm-hmm. I'm going to turn it over to Clive, who was a longtime fan of Mobius.
Yeah, I grew up with those kind of a lot of French comic book artists, and Mobius was clearly one of the artists that I followed and was very, very influenced by. And this project just seemed to be perfect because what we needed to do to create the animated version of Star Wars, we needed to capture the vibe of the live action series and not just turn it into a funny cartoon, but make it somewhat believable and somewhat exciting. And the Mobius style certainly led us in that direction. And Frank Nissen, who worked with me style-wise on the movie, was also an amazing artist, an amazing fan of Mobius. So the Boba Fett character was created by George, and they had made up a kind of a mock-up suit, And we were sent a film, a black and white movie of about 10, 15 minutes of somebody wearing this suit and walking around in somebody's back garden in California. So we based the design on that mock-up. And, you know, that's how became a three-dimensional character.
So when I flew out to meet with George to talk about the 10-minute short and landed for Nelvana, at the end of the meeting, after everything went really well, he said, "And you'll get to introduce Boba Fett." But now, fans listening to this recording are going to not remember that at that point in 1978, Boba Fett had not yet appeared. So this was the introduction of Boba Fett. And so I acted, very interested in the fact that we are going to launch Boba Fett, but didn't know what that would mean.
I thank you for giving a little bit of context. Is that I remember that time, and I will tell you, I had a jazz band rehearsal and couldn't see the Star Wars Holiday Special, so it was years before I saw that cartoon, and at that time, I think there was one extra novel filling in some stuff, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, and a few Marvel comics, and some toys. And I don't think we'd even seen Boba Fett yet as a toy promise. What was the reaction afterward? Because you are essentially the only part of that holiday special that that George Lucas acknowledges exists, right? And it's on Disney Plus. I just rewatched it last night, so people can catch up on your work there. But did you realize afterwards what impact you were having?
Well, we did, in the sense that it helped us, because we were a small company in Toronto. We were working on our second animated special, The Devil and the Annual Mouse. But having worked on the first Star Wars cartoon sort of gave us a big leg up. And the other benefit that we enjoyed over the years was, George took an interest in Nelvana and mentored us and gave us advice. We were busy trying to think of our first animated movie, and I shared that with him. And over the time that we worked together on, after the 10-minute Faithful Wookiee short, George was there giving us guidance and advice, and also developing some other projects with us.
Okay, and I was struck watching Droids and Faithful Wookiee last night. The art direction and the animation is so complex, above and beyond what other, what was passing, for Saturday morning. Were there moments you two were just like, are we trying too hard?
No, I don't think so. Never. I mean, that, we've always loved what we do, and we do it with a passion, and we make sure that we're doing the very best we can. And I don't like working on something that I don't like. So we make sure that it meets our own level of acceptance and our own quality level. So I never thought that we were going overboard on that. We just work and make sure it's the absolute best that we can, and really enjoy it. I mean, rule number one, you've got to have fun, right?
That was rule number one. But rule number two was, we really made a decision early on that we wanted to do, high-end animation. We wanted to do, good animation. And at the time, if you remember, a lot of the, Saturday morning, which was where most animation was seen in that period, was full of shows that were more and more limited every year. And so Hanna-Barbera and Filmation dominated the scene and were producing whatever they could get away with. And we decided that if, we as a small company working out of Toronto, where there was no animation industry, there was no film industry, if we were going to break in, we had to pick a place that would, sort of facilitate that. And that place was great animation, great quality.
And what worked to our advantage was that as we were growing Nelvana, Sheridan College, which is just down the road from us, was starting up their animation course. So they were developing students who grew up with Disney and loved Disney animation, loved that high quality. And so young animators coming out of Sheridan College really, if they wanted to stay in Toronto, had nowhere to go except Nelvana. So we built the studio on, young animators that were very keen to do high quality full animation. And we all learned at the same time. We kind of grew up together, and that was a real advantage for us.
And we mentioned Mobius, and at least according to Wikipedia, Nelvana is named after a Canadian superhero from the 1940s, Nelvana of the Northern Lights. And you look at that IMDb, you have adapted, and I loved them all, some pretty obscure comics for series. You Cadillacs and Dinosaurs and Sam and Max, Freelance Police, a personal favorite. Was there? You're obviously comics fans or very knowledgeable. What was one that you wanted to do but it got away?
So one of the ones that we optioned and we developed was Barbarella, based upon the French graphic novel, which gave birth to the Jane Fonda movie by Roger Vadim. And we had developed that, but I think we were a little ahead of our time. We often, we started when we started, we were doing a lot of experimenting with storytelling and subject matter, and we did a lot of projects that were combining animation and live action. And we thought of ourselves as experimental filmmakers, and we thought of ourselves as filmmakers rather than just, falling into any category. And so we always pushed the envelope on, what stories we could tell, and sometimes we were ahead of the market. And with the case of Barbarella, I think that would have been an easier sale, a few years ago rather than 30 years ago.
Okay, ahead of your time. All right, and before we wrap up, or let us wrap up with your book, Animation Nation. So I want to give you the opportunity to just kind of pitch it here. What kinds of secrets will readers discover in your book?
Well, they'll learn about how we built Nelvana, and they've got a sneak peek of it today. We were three partners who thought of ourselves sometimes as the Three Stooges, but because we had a lot of fun, right?
Our staff definitely thought of us as the Three Stooges. Believe me, there are
they were right.
Cartoons all over the place of the three of us.
Yeah. So they'll learn about the beginning of Nelvana, and then there came a point where we sold Nelvana, and we all ended up leaving, and I went on to found a company called Cookie Jar, which did projects like Johnny Test and Caillou and Arthur and Doodle Bops and Busy Town Mysteries. And then when I sold that company, I then started another company called Wow Unlimited Media, where I combined Frederator and Mainframe. So I talk a lot about what it takes to build these studios and kind of the business behind the scenes, and also relate some of the stories about working with Lucasfilm. We worked with Tim Burton on Beetlejuice, and we worked with Steven Spielberg on American Tail, the TV series, as well as Family Dog.
Family Dog, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of exciting stuff, and it's really about building an animation industry. It's not just about building companies, but building an industry. Canada had no industry when we started, and today Canada has a very dynamic, strong industry. The global market has a strong industry because we did a lot of our projects co-producing with countries all over the world and work to build up and share our expertise. And before we leave, we should mention that Clive has a book called, and I won't say the title because I always mess it up, but Clive, over to you.
Well, I did a graphic novel, a comic book called The Rather Unusual Adventures of Ice Cream Girl and Mr. Licorice. So that's actually my first foray into comic books, when it was released recently, and it'll be online on Amazon within a couple of weeks. It's a little bit autobiographical, I suppose. It's about a young man who sees the world as a cartoon, of course. But where it differs from my own life and my own father, he discovers that his father was in fact an animated character. So he has a cartoon gene, and that's why
Okay.
has these visions.
So it'll be
And
out in early May. That's fantastic.
I'll
Thank
show
you.
it to you. I'll show it to
Oh,
you. It's right here.
oh my
There,
gosh. All right.
a rather unusual adventure.
Perfect.
Wonderful.
Now, Derek, before we go, we should mention one other comic book project that we developed that went away. We were the first company to have the feature film rights for X-Men, and we developed a feature film with what was then Orion Pictures. We had Chris Claremont and Roy Thomas write the script. Unfortunately, it never got greenlit, and the rights went away, and other people went ahead and did the movie.
Wow. I didn't know that. That's what a lost opportunity. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you both for taking the time today, because this has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you both and break a leg, as they say, in Tokyo next week. And
All right.
I know, Clive, you're going to enjoy those 2 weeks.
I
I
know, I will.
absolutely love
Absolutely.
Tokyo.
Okay, good. Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Derek. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any Fanboy Planet video content. And visit us at fanboyplanet.com for more reviews, features, interviews, and the like, as well as the Fanboy Planet podcast. And remember, use your powers for good.